Comes in the name of the Lord.
Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Can people make positive changes in their lives that really last? Dr. Mark Baker has been trying to answer this question for the past 25 years as a clinical psychologist. To discover the answer, he went on a quest to find people who have changed their lives in the most dramatic ways, ending up in the largest maximum security prison in the United States, located in Angola and Louisiana. Once the most brutal prison in the country, Angola was transformed into one of the most effective sites for rehabilitation in the United States. He uses stories from inside Angola, along with his decades of experience as a clinical psychologist, to share with readers the amazing human potential for change and personal growth. Drawing on themes of forgiveness, community, justice, hope, and spirituality, he shows all of us how to change our lives for the better, no matter what and who we are or what we've done. Dr. Mark Baker has received a PhD in clinical psychology, a master's degree in theology, as well as a certificate in psychodynamic psychotherapy. He serves as the executive director of the Levy Counseling Centers in Pasadena and Santa Monica. He is the author of several books, including Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived, which is more than 2 million copies in print, and is the author of Overcoming Shame, Let Go of Others' Expectations, Embrace God's Acceptance. Dr. Baker joins us on the second Friday of every month at the 12 o'clock hour, here to discuss his new book, You Can Change, Stories from Angola Prison and the Psychology of Personal Transformation, and also our response to this pandemic. COVID-19 coronavirus is my friend, one of my safe people, Dr. Mark Baker. Mark, great to see you.
Good to see you, Eric. It's always good to be with you.
Mark, we are in a time that I want to go back to my email to you, and I called it a psychologist's buffet.
Right. We're living in a Rorschach where everyone is, whatever your worst nightmare is, you're seeing it all around you. If you're an anxious person, you're really anxious. If you're a fearful person, you're really fearful. If you're a depressed person, you're really depressed. Lonely, you're really lonely. This crisis, which is global, is touching on the deepest level of whatever our unresolved issues are that are causing them to all come rushing out. You can see it. I went this morning with my wife to the grocery store, and we get to go in early because I'm over 60. And as we're going through the aisles, you can see it in people's eyes. As you're coming down the aisle in the grocery store now has become a panic-stricken place to be. If someone looks you in the face, you can see the fear and the anxiety and the sadness, the grief. It's evoking all these deep feelings in all of us. So yes, this is a psychological, emotional, and spiritual crisis for us to face. I think particularly for us as believers, we have to ask ourselves, what is our response? How are we to be in this time? Because there's not been anything like this, not like this in my lifetime.
Now, the earliest recollection I have was polio. The vaccine came out in '53. Was in wide use like 56, 57, but I grew up in a neighborhood, and I had several friends that were polio victims.
Mm-hmm.
So it was still around. Tuberculosis was still around. Scarlet fever was still around in the early 50s. But it wasn't informationally as impactful. I mean, it just was. You went to the doctor.
Right.
You thought it was a fever, and you thought you had the flu, and the flu went away, and your left leg was paralyzed.
Right.
And they were going like, what does the flu have to do with your left leg being paralyzed? Well, they realized you had polio.
Right.
But what's happened in this pandemic, it's not the number of infections. It is the global impact. It affects the entire 7.5 billion population of the world. That it's not about whether or not you're going to get it or not get it. Statistically, the odds are 98% you won't get it. So it's not that fearful of, but the response has been dramatic, dynamic, and it's almost a Job-like statement, that which I have feared the most has come upon me.
Right.
Isolation, depression, fear, suicide, all of this feeding into, and what's funny is on the other side of that, there's people like me that are really introverts who have become professionally extrovert. I'm an extrovert by profession. I'm an extrovert by training.
Right.
I was trained to be a salesman, trained to be a public speaker, trained to do it. But being home with me and the dog is sanctuary. It's peaceful. It's quiet. It's nice. I have no problem with it. My mother is the same way. She's 93. My father's been gone 28 years. She has not had one moment where she's ever said, I'm lonely, or we're just not wired that way, I guess.
Right.
But this is fed into some really dark places for a lot of suffering people. Your phone has got to be ringing off the hook.
It is. We are. Well, we've shifted. The way we do therapy now is teletherapy. I'm now doing this with all my patients, and we at the counseling center have had to ramp up to figure out how to do teletherapy because people don't want to come into the office. We're being told to stay home, so they're
Right.
staying home. But yes, we're now quickly ramping up to be able to be there for people in the best way we can, because everyone is having their deepest demons triggered. The domestic violence is up. People are drinking more, using medication to numb their feelings more. This is a crisis. It's certainly an emotional crisis. Like you said, how many of us are going to die from it? Well, a small percentage are going to actually die. It's a large number of people, and that's tragic, but it's a small percentage of us, and yet all of us are feeling these very, very, very big emotions. And some of it is because each of us can pick up our phones. We're all walking around with a phone that can tell us how bad it is and what the statistics are. I know that in California, it's going to get really bad until next Friday. We're not going to peak until a week from today. No, I didn't know any of that stuff when I was growing up and heard about diseases and polio, and we all have that information, and it's flooding into us from, unfortunately, from media sites that want us to be upset about it. Because that gets attention, and that's what they're trying to do, is give us information and evoke emotion. So we've got to figure out how to stand in this. What is our response to be? We know in psychology that events like this are upsetting, and some people will be injured. And psychological injury is being overwhelmed by emotions that we experience as intolerable. We call that psychological injury. But psychological trauma is going through psychological injury, but having to face it alone. We know that people become then traumatized because they not only are injured psychologically, but they have nowhere to go with those feelings, or they don't go anywhere with those feelings. So I think what's really critical for us to grasp onto as believers in the midst of this is that when the psalmist says, I'll fear no evil, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, because you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. That's our key verse. Uh, it, God doesn't say that he'll take us out of the valley. God doesn't say there are no valleys. God doesn't say, you know what, I'm going to remove all evil, so don't worry about it. Nothing to fear here. That's not what he says. He says, evil is there, but if you go with me, you don't have to fear it. That's how we will face evil. Not that it'll go away, not that it won't happen to us, but that God will go with us in it. We have a resource for us as believers. We can turn to God so that we don't have to go through this injurious time alone. People will be injured. People will be traumatized if they are isolated emotionally and spiritually. Then is likely to be very traumatic for them. We don't have to do that. We have a God who's going to go with us, and we can go with others. We can reach out to others, call people we haven't talked to in years, let them know they're not alone. And comfort then is not taking away the pain. Comfort is giving strength in it, so that we can draw strength from God and provide strength to each other in the midst of a crisis. This is true comfort. The word comfort in English, comfort, comes with, fort is strength, as in fortify, with strength. That's what the word means in English. And that's, I think, clearly the biblical definition of comfort is God providing strength in the midst of trial. That's what true comfort is, not making it go away. So that's, I think, our challenge, especially when everyone's got they're running around with their hair on fire and the world's falling down around all of us. We as believers, I think, can stand in the middle of this and realize we draw our strength from a God who's with us, a God who suffers with us, and we can suffer with those around us, and they're not being alone because of us being there with them. Right. Is what prevents trauma.
In my note to you, I said, here families are thrown together. Mom, dad, kids are all home for extended periods of time. And it's either going to bring healing and unity, or it's going to exacerbate a situation where we're going to see an increase in domestic violence and spousal abuse or child abuse, and it's is this a preparation for a time to come? Is this what it's going to look like when you've got an Antichrist, when you've got you're going to have to take the mark of the beast in order to get your toilet paper. You're going to have to make decisions as to what you're going to do. There's going to be a certain amount of casualties in this battle to come, and those that survive are going to have to make a choice as to which side they're going to be on. Mm-hmm. And people are having to face and make choices. When this all came about, Matthew 25 jumped into my spirit, and it was the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 weren't prepared, and when they finally got ready, it was too late. He said, listen, you can't come in. It was the 5. So is this a get ready kind of moment? Is this when families need to gather together and say, what is important to us? What does matter with us? I mean, Dad's thrown at home where he might not spend 2 or 3 hours, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours a night, if he is that much with the family, and then sometime on the weekend when he's not doing other things, he's 24/7 with the family. Is this making things better? Is it making things worse? Are you seeing an increase in people who are using this time to do a lot of self-examination and introspection and saying, I realize this about myself and I want to use this time to work on it?
We're seeing both. I think whatever was under the surface before the last 2 weeks is now been surfaced. So if there were issues there, unresolved issues, things that had not been spoken yet, people are being forced together, and that stuff is coming out. I'm working with a Christian couple who have been, struggling with conflict, and Now they're thrown together. They were both independently working full time, and now they're together 24/7, and they've got
Right.
kids at home. And so that changes everything. So those conversations that they were avoiding, or they could put off, or uh, kick the can down the road, they can't anymore because they're there all day long, dealing with each other. And the husband has an issue with kind of impulse control, and so he's impulsively doing things, and she's just really angry at him for that. And that's tolerable if it's only like a few minutes a day, because there are other things to deal with. But if it's all day long, okay, that's an issue that really needs to be addressed. And initially, they're blaming each other and fighting. Well, it's your fault. Well, I wouldn't be this way if you weren't that way. And it took now the last 3 weeks of focus for him to say, you know what, I need to look at myself in this. I've got an issue here. I'm impulsive, and I did that thing the other day because I was impulsive. And you could see the look on her face was like, what? Wait, was that humility there that's coming out? He was able to grasp the moment and realize this is a moment. It's a moment for me to look at me, not for me to blame her. What most of us think in relationships is, I've got all the good advice in the world for you, and if you would just listen to me, this would all go better. What we don't realize is that what changes in relationships is when we begin to look at ourselves and ask the question, what is it that I need to learn here? Especially in marriage. I think that God has sent us, and the reason we select the person we select, because I believe there's a direction there, a divine direction, that God has sent us the perfect person to make us grow more than anyone else on the planet could. We unconsciously select this person. Why this person did we pick? Because I think we had unfinished business that God loved us too much to leave unfinished. Now, what I'm saying is that when we get married, we pick the perfect person to make us more mad than any other person on the planet. That person is going to take you to the deeper place of yourself, irritate you like no one else could. People often come to my office and they say, I get along with everybody else, but I can't get along with her, so it must be her fault. And my response is, well, that's called marriage. You picked someone who's going to sharpen you and make you the best version of yourself if, in each one of your fights, you ask yourself, what do I need to learn in this confrontation? Not what does she need to learn? That's the main lesson that people are trying to figure out right now. The conflict they're experiencing, and the spousal abuse that's going on, and the domestic violence that's going on, because they're not doing this one thing. People are not saying, what is it that I need to learn from this? Why are we colliding and banging up against each other? And why isn't this working in harmony? Sure, the other person has things that they need to learn about themselves, but that doesn't do you any good. What does you good is for you to ask God to teach you, what do you need to learn from this conflict? That's what changes us. And I'm telling you, you selected this person because they're the perfect person to irritate you more than anyone else on the planet, because you're not going to be perfected unless you go through that trial. And this time, this crisis, is forcing us to go even deeper into those relational dynamics and unfinished issues we have with ourselves that this person God has sent to you can make you look at more than any other person on the planet. It's an opportunity for us if we accept the challenge.
From a forward-looking view of the fallout from the fear factor, from the isolation factor, how do you see the country and really the globe responding? I mean, there's nations that have lived like this. This is normal.
Right.
For us, this is abnormal.
Right.
Countries that live in poverty and fresh water is a luxury. These kind of issues don't shake them. But for the West, this is a real shaking. And if you're isolated, and that seems to be a big part of this, is this social distancing, this isolation, this you can't have fellowship if you're single with the body, so you live by yourself, then you have fellowship with yourself. Are we seeing any statistical increase in suicides or in people breakdowns, or people making the call to the hotlines or psychiatric psychopharmacologists who is there an increase in prescriptions? Do we have that data?
It's all happening so fast that data are hard to collect. But yet what we're seeing is, yes, we're seeing an increase in anxiety, depression, and the fear-driven emotions that are causing domestic violence. We know that is up. Certain things are down, like crime, because people are still, isolating. But the intense emotions are up, and what's good for us physically, which is to isolate and quarantine, is bad for us spiritually and emotionally. We have to stay connected. And a good thing is that now people are Zooming and they're Skyping and they're FaceTiming, and that part's good, so that we can try to remain connected, at least in this virtual way. But we are having to face these emotions that other cultures have, like you said, lived with. I have a colleague who's an Armenian, and she said her grandmother said to her, "What's the big deal? You guys are afraid of the flu." They had to all run for their lives. She remembers what she lived through in terms of their having to escape. They had to run. They run for their lives. A whole generation of people had to run for their lives, and so that survivalist mentality was handed down for 3 generations. And so my colleague, who's trying to isolate and stay safe, and her grandmother is irritated with her because she sees this as a crisis when there's no one with a gun coming after you.
Right.
We've had to live with a survivalist mentality that her grandmother did her whole life, and so to be someone who's afraid of the flu was hard for her to grasp it, hard for her grandmother to grasp it. There are cultures still that exist, and those cultures have been traumatized because of that, and that gets handed down from generation to generation. I would hope that we don't do that to our kids because of this, that we teach them to live in fear. I think we need to teach them to be smart. I'm keeping social distance from people. I wear a mask when I go to the grocery store. I'm doing what the medical experts are telling me to do, but I'm not isolated.
Right.
I'm staying connected. I'm not going to let that fear of this lethal flu keep me from reaching out and connecting, because that's what ends up in trauma for a whole culture. We're in danger of that if we don't stay connected.
And there's people that are exhibiting PTSD type of symptoms, and if there was a latency towards addiction, that's being exacerbated, or time to drink. Somehow the drug dealers are still getting out there and delivering, because it doesn't seem to be a fallout in that area. So they've certainly found a way, and they're not concerned about the virus. It's just interesting that this is like the OJ thing. Like everybody, all they're doing is following one story, and from a population perspective of 7.5 billion, it's had a net effect on less than 1% of the population of the world, and it's become the focal point of everybody's life. Right. We're back in the studio. We're not bothered by it. Nobody else. The radio stations, and there's 7 of them next door. Summit, they're closed. They put their playlists in. Their disc jockeys are at home with a remote connection, and all they're doing is they've already pre-programmed, and they know when. And all they're doing is watching the clock, and they talk, and they watch the clock, and they talk, and there's nobody there. All 7 stations are completely automated and unmanned, but we're in here doing live TV. We're talking with Dr. Mark Baker, author of Overcoming Shame, Let Go of Others' Expectation, and Embrace God's Acceptance. the author of You Can Change, Stories from Angola Prison and the Psychology of Personal Transformation, and one that you can get online right now and read it. Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived, a global bestseller, and still a bestseller with great wisdom and experience in it, talking about the psychological impact of what this coronavirus, what this pandemic is, what psychological impact, and is it something that we will be tracking and looking at and measuring in the future? Because biblically, there is a much harder time ahead than this. And if this test breaks us, there's no hope for the test to come. And so I think that this is God saying, people get ready, there's a train a-coming. And we need to get ready. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue this discussion with Dr. Mark Baker. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with author and professional counselor, Psychologist Dr. Mark Baker, author of Overcoming Shame, Let Go of Others' Expectations, Embrace God's Acceptance, in his latest book, You Can Change, Stories from Angola Prison and the Psychology of Personal Transformation. Mark, welcome back to the program.
Eric, good to see you.
So, Mark, we're deep in this, and we can only speculate that by the time that this passes and we begin the data collection and we begin the statistical analysis and the papers start coming out as to the trauma effect and statistical analysis of numbers of cases of this, and it certainly will keep the institutions and the grant writers busy for some time to come, is to measure the psychological impact of the coronavirus or pandemic of any kind. It's kind of interesting because Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, 9/11. We didn't have this daily report. We didn't glorify it, edify it, and 9/11. I'm sorry to say, but it's not a thing anymore. You know, it was a terrible tragedy. There's a lot of new, really bizarre stories coming out of 9/11, like why were all the vaults underneath 9/11 empty when the buildings came down? Somebody would have had to have known, because they stored, a foreign country was storing 4,000 tons of gold bars, and they weren't there when the building came down. Right. So how did they know to get them out? I mean, these are the stories that are now, through investigative journalism, these forensic journalists that are now digging in, now that everybody's not paying attention to what they're looking at, they're digging in. These are the stories that I'm getting through, because I have all these back channels that feed me stuff, and they're saying, we're finding some really, some anomalies in these stories that we can't find answers to. Like every major vault, and the way the buildings were built was the whole bottom floor was a complete vault, and the United States Federal Reserve kept money there, and it wasn't there when the building came down. How did they know to get it out? These are the questions that are coming out now, 19 years later. So, there's going to be, but Chernobyl, here we had this first real, 3 Mile Island, I think was first, was a nuclear reactor. And here was a country that was, remembered the Cuban Missile Crisis, remembered mutual assured destruction, remembered the siren going off when you were a kid and you were to crawl underneath your wooden desk for the Connell rat alert, because that was going to protect you. Think about the things we did in elementary school is to protect ourselves. They told us that would protect us.
Right. They gave you something to do.
Right. And then, of course, there was the Kennedy assassination, and that got some coverage. But I got so tired of hearing, where were you when Kennedy got shot, that I finally asked, what am I, a suspect? That's where were you when the space shuttle came down? What am I, a suspect? I mean, do I need an alibi? I mean, there was a question that got asked so many times. It was part of a comedy routine, but these are questions that got asked so many times. I felt like I needed an alibi. I was starting to feel guilty that I need to have a good answer as to where I was, in case they were looking at me as a potential suspect. But we don't really know. We can't really measure in the moment, and that is that's disconcerting. That's a little more concerning to me, because now we're looking at the human psyche and how the human psyche, when it comes to the edge, or it breaks, or you come to a breaking point, there's no forecast, there's no anticipation, there's no, there could be a mass rising up. People are saying, wait a minute, 30 more days of keeping me at home? No,
Right.
I'm not doing that. Is that a recipe for rebellion, for a civil
Yes.
war?
Yes, it is. I think we're in danger of that because you cannot corral us, isolate us, and then tell us that you're going to do that for we don't know how long. I know when the coronavirus is supposed to peak in California, but they're not telling me how much longer I'm going to have to stay at home. That will have a breaking point. It is psychologically not possible for us to stay sequestered. And survivors of other traumas already know that. They know the need to affiliate is what happens. I remember after 9/11, the terrorists were attempting to terrify us with sending the message to everyone in America that going about your daily life, you're not safe. So you should be afraid. You should hide. You should stay in your house and not go out because we could blow you up at any point. That was the message of terrorism. We're going to make everyone feel afraid just to even go to work. And what we saw here in California, even though this happened in New York, is that right after that happened, people flooded out of their houses to stand in line and give blood because they just wanted to be together. I want to connect with someone who gets the depth of this trauma. And people stood in line for 4 and 5 hours to give blood for people they didn't even know in New York,
Right.
here in LA, because they needed to be together. This is traumatic. I'm scared. I don't want to stay in my house alone. I need other people, and other people who get why I'm afraid, who just want to be with me. We are fundamentally relational creatures. We are ontologically created to need to relate. So the isolation thing, while I still say again, I think we need to wear masks and sanitize and hand sanitizer and all that stuff is good. Spiritually and psychologically, we need to stay connected. We're fundamentally made to need to relate, especially in times of crisis. And this will create rioting. This will create domestic violence, already is. This is going to create an intensification of psychological problems. If I feel like I'm already a lonely type of person or a depressed kind of person, and now I got to stay home for 2 straight months, that's a bad formula. We are going to have to find ways to connect that work. Everyone on my staff is trying to figure out Zoom. We're trying to figure out how to doxy me and VC and connect with people, because people need to connect. And it is harder to do it virtually. It requires more energy from me to connect to other people through a screen, but it's not zero. I'm not alone.
Right.
I started up. I've got 2 very good friends, one in Atlanta, one in Kansas City. We see each other every few years, and now every 2 weeks we're gonna Zoom, because everybody's doing it, and why didn't we think of that before? Reviving 40-year-old friendships where we can connect, and it gives me something to look forward to and a connection, and it is how I'm made. And if we try to deny how we're made, thinking we can stay isolated and alone for a long period of time, bad things will happen. So we have to face this and stay connected as we face this. And I'm thinking of, as you know, my latest book was on the prison in Angola, largest maximum security prison in the country. And I learned so many lessons from these men who are spending their whole lives there. 90% of them will never leave the prison. They're there for violent crimes, and as a result of those violent crimes, they're there for life. And so the men that I met there, men who had come to know God there in the prison, were surprisingly the most peaceful men I'd ever met. Men who are trapped in a prison. They're never going to get out of this prison. And you'd think, what motivation is there for you to be at peace? But they have found their relationship with God and a deep, intimate relationship with each other, because they get each other, right? I mean, nobody could be shocked at what I've done. You're there for the same reasons I'm there. So their ability to be vulnerable and honest with each other creates a sense of connection. And that sense of connection gives them the peace that's really hard for anybody else to understand. The Asante Witherspoon, the guy that was there at the prison for 20 years, 20 of his 75-year sentence. He came to know the Lord there in the prison and became such a peaceful and secure person that his job was, after he'd been there about 20 years, his job was to go out of the prison into local communities and talk to kids and youth groups about the dangers of criminal activity and drug use. And if you don't look out, one bad choice will end up living my life here in prison. He would go by himself out into the community, give this lecture, get back in his van, no guard there, no chains, drive himself back into the prison, get back in his bunk, lock him back in his prison, lock up the door. And he was asked once by a video crew who followed him around, because he's out there giving this lecture outside the prison, why don't you try to run away? And he said, because I wouldn't be free. I would just be escaping. What I have in my relationship with God and my fellowship there in prison is truly freedom. I'm free on the inside. I'm free spiritually. Physically, you cannot imprison my spirit. And if I ever get out, it'll be because I am free to go, not that I'm trying to escape something. Because I have found true freedom in my connection with God and with other men here in the fellowship. That's what produces peace in these guys under the most difficult circumstances you can imagine. And there are other violent men there in the prison. It's not like they were all peaceful guys, but in the midst of that environment, they found peace in their relationship with God and each other. It was psychologically brilliant that they understood that even though this is a difficult situation, I am not going to be traumatized because I'm going to remain connected to God and to these other men. That allows me to bear up under the burden of these stressful times. We could learn a lot from these guys. We could learn a lot how to bear up under the stress of this time. This is a test. I think this is a test. And if we fail at this test, there are other tests to come that are going to be much harder.
Absolutely, no question. I mean, Jesus said, if you follow me, there's going to be tribulation. We haven't really known tribulation. What you just described gives me a lot of comfort, because Jason and I get dropped off every morning at the home for the aged television personalities, and then they drop us off, and then they come pick us up, and we find comfort in that as well. So
you found true freedom, brother.
True freedom is going back to that home for the aged television personalities. It's just, you find comfort there. The school aspect, the role that the early settlers played in the development of America. Before there was a school marm and a one-room schoolhouse and all of that. This seems to me like it's a golden opportunity for us to impart values, to take peer pressure, to take bullying out of the equation, to help develop a child's personality, to help develop their giftings, to help get to know, really, if you think about it, you send your child away to school for 6 or 8 hours a day, you know what's being produced, but you don't really know the child. This gives parents an intimate understanding of how their child operates, thinks, responds. It's like a second chance.
It's an opportunity. All three of my kids are now at home. They're doing academia virtually. Now they're all on courses, but they're doing it from their bedrooms, right? And what I have really cherished the last couple of weeks is that I get to have dinner with all three of my kids every night. I can't remember the last time that's happened. We're all here at the same time. I mean, I'm doing my video thing here, then I go downstairs and I get to have a conversation with my kids. Now, it's a battle because they'd really rather be FaceTiming somebody else.
Right.
But it's an opportunity for us as a family to have a sense of connection that I believe could ground us for the rest of our lives. There's an opportunity here to spend just a few more minutes. Families don't realize that even in most marriages, they just spend a few minutes a week face to face.
Right.
Just a few. Statistically, it's not very many minutes. So if you have a 15 or 20-minute dinner together with your whole family, that's actually a significant amount of time. You can make a difference in just that amount of time. I hope we do capitalize on this opportunity for families to have literal face-to-face time where we can make connections and implant values, our family values. In our family, we value this because they're going out into a world that doesn't share the same values. It's an opportunity.
And I mean, I FaceTime with my daughter and granddaughter several times a week. You know, they actually have you can't get into Florida from Alabama or from Louisiana because they're trying to keep their virus, and Florida's not in good shape, and so they're trying to keep it contained. So I plan on spending some of the time down there, but that got changed, and so we just shifted gears and said, okay, we'll FaceTime more often. So you know, she's 8 months old, but hears my voice, sees my face. We have a little interaction. I don't know what the psychology of it is, but she shows me her feet. That's whenever she sees my face, she leans back and lifts up her feet, shows me both her feet, and then she puts them down. And I'm getting to see all of it. It's kind of like her saying, I want you to see all of me. I don't want you to see my face. This is a part of me too. And it's kind of connecting with the whole person. And it's fun getting to watch the personality develop in her as to what she thinks is what'll make her smile, and you know, the interaction. But I guess that out of this will come a lot of case studies from a psychological standpoint. A lot of research is being developed, if you will. I'm sure there's people who are watching, even just responses, a lot of bloggers. It's a different season. In your years of study, there wasn't blogging. There weren't people putting papers out every day in 2 paragraphs.
Right. Research has changed.
Yeah, when you published a paper, you spent 9 months and peer-reviewed and then published. Now you can do it in 160. You can publish a paper in 160 characters.
It's everything has changed, and it's immediate, it's fast, and you can put out information now on the internet. And I just had a conversation with a neuropsychologist asking the same question. How is it going to be different for us trying to relate to people through video like this? What about mirror neurons? What about how the brain is able to read other people in their presence? There's so much data that's lost here. And what he said to me is, we'll adapt. We will adapt. That's what we do. New technology comes along, we adapt to the technology. So he was very optimistic, thinking that we can still have powerful exchanges like you're having with your granddaughter, where she's having an experience of you. Right. There's a game, she's playing a game with you, and you play the game with her. That's really critical to development. That the feet go away, they come back, they go away, they come back. That change, you're negotiating some kind of a relationship, and she develops the capacity for empathy and how to play and how to relate. And we'll adapt. I think we'll adapt to the technology.
I remember the first time I went to a therapist and they didn't have a couch, and I thought that was a radical shift, a radical change. It was something I was going to have to adapt to, and I went to 2 overstuffed chairs, kind of facing each other. And
that's right.
I kept looking for the couch, and I was going for a particular situation, and he said, let me just be honest with you, my wife hated the way my office was decorated. I went to a conference and I came back and I had all new furniture and the couch was gone. So I said to him, get up. And so he stood up. I said, come sit here. I sat in his seat. I crossed my legs, I leaned back, and I said, "So, how long have these problems been going on with you and your wife?
Yeah.
How long have you been struggling with it?" And so that was a real situation. And I said,
Yeah.
"Hey, you got to adapt.
That's right.
You got to
That's
adapt."
good, yeah.
All right. We've been talking with Dr. Mark Baker, friend, author, psychologist, very devoted to this concept of studying and understanding our shame response and how we can change. And the dynamics of change and how that works is relationship and love and gentleness and understanding. This shame response that really it can be tied to so much of our sin responses steeped in shame. And for many of you who are out there, this, if you're in the West and you are sheltered at home and you're facing some circumstances of when you were a child and you're revisiting that because there's so much interaction with your children and it's reminding you of something that occurred, pick up the phone. Call your counselor or get a counselor. And you can have these conversations like we're having right now via Skype, via Zoom, via FaceTime, by telephone. It's available if it comes to your remembrance. And these are the kind of circumstances that do stimulate memory, that take you back to your last fearful or your most impactful fearful situation. Use it as an opportunity to reach out for help to articulate it, because if you can take it out, if you can get it out of your mouth, take it out of the darkness and bring it into the light and actually hear it, almost 50% of it dissipates the moment you say it. Then you learn how to process the rest. And has been my experience both as a counselor and being counseled, that just getting it out. That's why I say the first step in that 12-step program is to admit. I mean, you speak it, you take it out, and once you put it out there, first of all, it's not in a shadow, it's not as big as you thought it was. And there's ways, godly ways to handle these things. Dr. Mark Baker, we always appreciate your insights, your sense of humor. It's like looking in a mirror. It's separated, it's a 3,000-mile separation of twins. I think I'm Danny DeVito this time, and you'll be Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay, I'll accept that role.
All right, there you go. God bless you,
It's
my
my
friend.
honor.
Stay well. God bless you. Enjoy your family, and we thank you for being a part of the work we do here. I think we impact transparently a lot of lives that see that you can be real but have real issues, but you can talk them through, and with God's help, you can see them through to real lasting change. So
Amen.
God bless you, my friend, and happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter to you too.
Thanks.
God bless.
God bless. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.